Welcome to Resiliency Within, featuring your host, Elaine Miller-Karras. In unprecedented times, our beliefs and well-being are put to the test. When we take the things we've learned in life and look at challenges in a whole new way, we learn to develop resiliency, which can then be used to promote healing and personal strength. Now, here is Elaine Miller-Karras.
Welcome to Resiliency Within. I am your host, Elaine Miller-Karras, and today's show is honoring the wisdom of Indigenous people. And I am so grateful to have my guest today, and I'm going to introduce them in just a minute. But I want to tell you a little bit more about what we're going to be talking about today. First of all, November is National Native American Heritage Month, which pays tribute to the rich history and culture of the Indigenous people of the Americas. In 2009, during President Barack Obama's first term in office, November became National Native American Heritage Month. Magdalena Sunshine Serrano is an Indigenous woman of Serrano, Apache, and Tarahumara descent, and Julene Jose is an Indigenous woman of the Tohono O'odham Nation who also serves the Pasquayaqui tribe. Sunshine and Julene will share their perspectives and their wisdom about healing, hope, and empowerment in their communities. We can all learn from their collective wisdom. They both will also address how the community resiliency model is congruent to their organic views of healing. Over the last decade, the Trauma Resource Institute, our sponsor, has had the honor to learn about the true history of the Indigenous people who lived in these lands prior to the Europeans who settled in the Americas. The suffering has been great, and the maltreatment of Indigenous people has been a Holocaust often not acknowledged, but also the strength and beauty of the diverse cultures and traditions of Indigenous people will be discussed today. And the strength certainly has inspired me in so many different ways. And I hope that you will be able to hear and listen very closely to the wisdom of both of my guests. So let me tell you a little bit first about Magdalena Sunshine Serrano. She's a licensed clinical social worker specializing in trauma-informed treatment with Indigenous populations. She was born in Guadalupe, California, and she returned to the Central Coast in 2007 due to her desire to serve the local community. She had an associate's degree in liberal arts from Allen Hancock College, a bachelor's degree in sociology and American Indian studies from UCLA, and a master's degree of social work from USC. In 2015, she completed a public health program focused on health equity and community organizing in American Indian and Indigenous populations from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. She is the Director of Behavioral Health and Psychiatric Services of the Community Health Centers of the Central Coast and of California, and oversees the adolescent and adult mental health programs. In 2017, I'm so proud of you, Sunshine. She received the Latino Legacy Award for her contributions to increasing access to mental health treatment in Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo counties. So over the last 6 years, Sunshine and the CHC clinical leadership team has been committed to develop a culturally and linguistically inclusive care model where diversity is celebrated at all levels. Sunshine is currently a fellow, a California Healthcare Foundation Healthcare Leadership Program Fellowship, where she is focusing on the development of culturally and linguistically focused behavioral health integration models. Now, Julene Jose is doing so much to bring healing to her community, and she is a member, as I said, of the Tohono O'odham Nation. She is a resource coordinator of the Siwa Usam Community Partnership, Pasquayaqui Health Department. And I love when she says this because she's a granddaughter, a daughter, a sister, a wife, a mother. She's been married for 18 years and has 7 children with ages ranging from 21 years to 10 months old. She's also been on a journey in sobriety that reached 20 years in October. Jolene's background experience is very vast. It's been in early childhood, parenting, prenatal and childhood development, adolescent sexual health, childhood trauma, domestic violence, sexual assault, and the missing and murdered Indigenous women girls awareness programs. She has been a CRIM teacher and has been a CRIM guide, that's the community resiliency model, we shorten it to CRIM, for the last 4 years. And she has used the community resiliency model with youth, families, co-workers, and mostly in everyday life since learning the model. The tangible experience has brought her much hope and transformation and growth. I love to quote her when she says these beautiful things that come from her. So let's get started. I'm going to start by welcoming Julene and Sunshine to the show. And let's get started with just a first question to both of you. And that is, what's on your mind as we get started? We have a number of questions prepared, but I'm going to start with you first. Sunshine, what's on your mind?
Oh, I just want to say thank you so much, Elaine, for this introduction. Hamina Minowit Dami Chiak. Hello, everyone. My name is Magdalena Sunshine Serrano. I'm joining the show today from the ancestral homelands of the Chumash Shmala people. And I just want to thank you for inviting me to join this conversation. And the one thing that is just on my heart is that this conversation, I want to just acknowledge that it comes from a place of love and humility. Our lived experiences, our journey. And I'm just so grateful to have Julene sitting alongside of me in this virtual room, because the reality is our stories, our introductions reflect the diversity that we see in Indigenous communities. We are sisters from such different walks of life, but on the same path. And just the way in which we can honor that today and that different lived experience, I think is such a powerful opening for people to really understand who we are and just the diversity within Indigenous communities. So just thank you for that.
Thank you, Sunshine, for what a wonderful introduction. And now over to you, Julene. What would you like? What's on your mind today?
Julene Jose. I'm just so grateful as well. I'm so honored, and I also am noticing the warmth in my heart as we're talking, and it's just bringing me some joy. And I just really, I just feel blessed to be here and to share and to really honor our ancestors as well. And so I thank you for having me here today.
Thank you, Julene, and thank you both for being here to share that wisdom. So I want to start out by asking you a question about what is the meaning for you of the National Native American Heritage Month? So I'll start again with Sunshine, and then I'll come back to Julene.
So I think the fact that we are having an intentional pause throughout this month to really talk about what Native American folks have brought to our community, I believe that it's so vital now more than ever. I really think of 2020 as this year of reckoning for us as a generation of Indigenous people to really lift up one another and share our truth. I love that we're talking about heritage, which really does include history. From other conversations, we've talked about how so often Black, Indigenous communities of color's story has been told by someone else, right? It's a voice outside. And I feel like in these kind of spaces that you're creating today, Native Americans can tell our own story in our own words, in our own way. And in doing so, we truly do honor the gifts of our ancestors by celebrating Indigenous knowledge, our traditions, our language, our culture, our food, our music, the things that really are reflective of who we are, that aren't like a snapshot of the past, but who we are today, living and breathing, in our bodies now. And the other thing that I'm so excited about you creating this space for is I can't highlight more the diversity. I mean, so many people do not realize that we're talking about 570 plus nations of people. In California alone, there's over 109 nations just in little California. And I think so often, we are placed in a box and there's not an understanding of our rich diversity and story. So for me, this is a month of celebration, opportunity after opportunity to lift up and talk about who we are, who we've been, who we're going to be, who our generations are to come. And that for me is such a celebration. And to be able to do so in a way with other women who, hold so much of that family system together. So.
Thank you, Sunshine, for your insights. And how about for you, Julene? What does National Native American Heritage Month mean to you?
For me, it's a recognition of our ancestors, bringing honor to them through my actions, of being a mother, through my actions of, being a healer, and then just really looking at it like Sunshine said, like there are so many nations, that are out there, and we're just representing a few, and, you know, um, and I just feel honored, like I said again, and I also feel like, um, you know, it brings a pride as a Native person, that we're not forgotten, and, you know, we've our history, our past of being, trying to be wiped out through genocide and whatnot. And we are still here,
Mhm.
and we are still standing strong, stronger than ever. And, passing all of that strength, to our young ones and to our families we serve. And, I just really feel that's so important, to recognize that. And even for those who, you know, maybe not know of their ancestry, to study that, to learn about it, to find out who their relatives are, to learn about their culture, about their language, and again, bring that as a celebration to them and as a part of who they are.
Well, and as you,
Can I?
yes, please go ahead,
So
Sunshine.
sorry. Just when she's talking, it brings up this
Go ahead.
energy. These are the discussions, Elaine, that remind folks that Native American history is American history. This is all part of that. And I think that's the part around really recognizing that so we can move forward. We have to acknowledge the painful truths of the past so we can work through the process of forgiveness. Without that, there really can't be that healing. And so as Julene is talking, it's just, it really resonates that this is how we create an equitable and inclusive future. This is how we really move the needle towards the direction that we are all talking about and take it from this theoretical framework to a reality. So sorry,
No, and I think it's so important as you both are talking, because we're also talking about the truthful history that comes from Indigenous people themselves, not a history that was, well, to use a better, I guess, whitewashed, that wasn't really the true history. And I think that's why it's so important for you as two women representing two, well, different tribes, different parts of the country, knowing that there's 570, is that what you said, Sunshine? That's a lot, right? And each one may have their own language, their own cultures, their own traditions. And I think it's also important for our listeners to know that and to acknowledge that not every tribe is the same, right? And not every tribe has the same customs, even though there can be some threads because we all are humans. But I think that living history is so important. So thank you for bringing that out. And that brings me to my next question that I have for both of you. And can you share with us your journey of what has inspired you to do the work you are passionate about in the world? And this time I'm going to go with Julene first, and then I'll go to Sunshine second. So what inspired you? Julene, I've been so impressed by hearing you speak, and you're a wonderful teacher, and you're so committed to the Pasquayaki tribe as well as your own. So what has inspired you on this journey?
For me, it's service to my relatives. Growing up, learning from my grandmother, learning from my mom, and all my relatives that, as Indigenous people, service is actually held very high. It's a very high esteem. It's something that is very honorable. And learning that, through my family and our culture and our traditions, the first is last and the last is first, and just like really living that and being a servant. And
So the first is last and the last is first.
yes.
So this
yes.
is a statement from your culture. Oh, that's beautiful. Yes.
Yes. And just knowing, like, when you're, say at an event, to be a servant to others, to welcome others, and you may be that first person there to help set up or whatever, but you let everybody go first before you. And just always trying to keep that in mind of, and knowing that all these people are somehow related to me in some fashion, because that's how we are as natives. We're relatives to each other, and, just wanting to have that servanthood, and living it, not just talking it, but living it, and, modeling these different things, and especially, for my children, wanting them to have those qualities, those family values instilled into them. And, hopefully that rubs off on other people as well.
Yes. And so how about for you, Sunshine? What has inspired you to do the work that you do in the world?
So for me, it goes back to a very tender age. So my father is a Native veteran, and so I grew up with mental illness and addiction, probably from a very little age, but I didn't have words for that. And so always having a sense of knowing that there was a need, there was pain, right, or a sense of need for healing, that awareness. And I think even from a small age, having that spirit of service that Julene talks about, of how can I help? How can I make this better? How can I support? And then ultimately, as a young person, I remember being about 17 years old when I first started dealing with my own challenges, with my own mental health. And at that time, I remember very clearly my very well-intended mom praying for me, my very well-intended mom offering me different, integrative medicines, which are all part of the journey and process. But at that time, me really not feeling understood or witnessed, and feeling very alone. And not until I went away to school and was able to get what we would call traditional or non-Western treatment, was I better able to understand what was happening, not just for myself, but really about this cycle of intergenerational, transgenerational trauma. And I say this from a place of strength and resilience, but also knowing that part of the journey is having spaces where you can feel accepted, for who you are and who you are not, for what you know and what you don't know. And so that really for me is the foundation of why I get up every day, why I rise. I think of the community that I serve as, it's almost like my sponsors, right? My sponsors in wellness, my
Yes.
sponsors in well-variety, my sponsors in healing. I never want a young person or a family to endure some of the struggles and the challenges and the sufferings that I have known because of lack of access to care. So, for me, this work is about ensuring that your zip code never determines what your health status looks like. That because you don't have gas or you can't drive an hour, that doesn't really stop you from getting access to treatment and healthcare. So for me, it's really about opening different doors, right? Different doors for different communities in which the language is spoken, the the understanding is there, that there's a cultural respect, and it really comes from my own foundational space of being that little girl who knew that more was needed in the community, and wanting to ensure that my daughter, my grandchildren that are not yet here, never have to have those same challenges.
And so, although I know you both are working hard in your own communities to bring in wellness skills that really can address some of the mental health challenges that you are seeing in your communities, so that accessibility that you're talking about, Sunshine, that you didn't have, do you see that through the work that you both are doing, that there's more accessible for people to get help in your communities than you saw, let's say, when you were children?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think the power of what we're doing right now is like destigmatizing, decolonizing the conversations, and not going from a place of, what happened to you, but what is happening and how can we really support you in this journey, right? And that unpackaging is tremendous. And I think the work Julene's doing in the community, it's about creating an infrastructure that's grassroots from the ground up. It's a different kind of support piece.
Yeah. And would you say that to be true too, Julene?
Yes, definitely. And the work that I'm doing here, working with the community, a lot of the things that we do is strength-based, it's community-based. We go to the elders before anything, get permission from elders. We incorporate language, we incorporate a lot of the cultural things that they do, teachings. So we are very cautious and aware, and intentional, I think is the word I want to use, in the work that we do in bringing a lot of these things to our families. And, and it's true, like, there are so many things that we are doing here that I never had access to as a youth or a child. And we're just really standing in the gaps, finding where the gaps are and standing in those gaps, for families so that they can have that safety, that they can grow, and then even destigmatizing a lot of those mental health, uh, you know, things that come up within the
Challenges,
family
yeah.
systems. Yeah.
So I can see that you're both bringing about awareness in a different way. And so that brings me to my next question is how, you said a little bit about this already, but I would love for you to expound a little bit more on it, is that how has the teachings of your people influenced your perspectives as one who brings healing to your community? I mean, you both have shared the healing, a bit about the healing practices from your heritage. And I know there might be some that you cannot share, but others you might be able to share with us. So I'll go to Sunshine first this time.
Yeah, so I think the biggest framework difference is transitioning from a Western model to an Indigenous model of healing is not about disease management. It's not about symptom management. It's about healing and returning to the center, right? To our true center of that journey. And for me, that sentiment of healing is about opening communication around the isms, really talking about the truth, the good, the bad, the ugly, forgiveness, the understanding. And so I think that really influences the framework. And I think Julene touched on this. It's like decolonizing some of that knowledge and that stigma and realizing the roots of some of those pieces. So for me, that process really just starts with being aware of community, aware of the fact that you're not just treating the person in front of you, that you're working with their family system, but not just family system, community as they define it, and the natural resources and strengths that they bring in. And there has to be space for all of that if we want to promote healing. It's very much defined by individual and community.
Well, and it sounds like too that your strength-based approaches that both of you have are very important, because I mean, when we were preparing for the talk, one of the things that we touched upon was that sometimes during Heritage Month, it's all the horrible things.
Mhm.
And yes, there is that in terms of what you said, is not avoiding and knowing about the heritage and the true history. But then, I think you said it, Julene, but there's things happening right today, right, that are about healing and bringing our strength, our resources, helping your children and children now being taught about your language and customs in a very strength-based way, and how important that is right now. It has always been important, but it wasn't always allowed. I mean, there were even laws, right, that were passed that you were not supposed to practice your cultural traditions. That of course, thank goodness, has changed over the times, but not so recently that might have been something that you both were impacted by, and certainly your elders were impacted by. So in terms of this question to you, Julene, is there something more you'd like to say about how the teachings of your people have influenced your perspectives? You shared a little bit already, but is there more that you'd like to say?
Yeah, so growing up, with my grandmother, like kind of more or less sharing, like, you got to live in two worlds. You have the world of your culture and your language, but then you're going to go to school and you're going to be like, you know, in this whole other new world, I guess you can say, in her perspective, and learn how to navigate that world as well. But also taking all of those wonderful teachings and all the good things that have been passed down and having that as strength, and so really kind of walking like in between and, knowing how to navigate, the new world, as my grandmother said, and then as the traditional world, and, bringing the two together and to help others to make sense of it, and then being able to be that ambassador as well. And, because there are times families, may not have the education or may not have the understanding of this new world. And so bringing those things, concepts to them in a way that they can understand, in the way that does make sense to them. And language, could be a barrier. Education can be a barrier. Socioeconomics can be a barrier, all those different things, but really just trying to, again, stand in the gap and to help those to understand for their care, and their health.
Well, and as you're talking too, I kept on thinking of the word communication, how important it is, as your own children, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about that after the break, is they're going into a world where certain things are being taught, and yet there's an oral history and a cultural history that you are teaching the children, and they may not match. And so then in here, we're taught to respect teachers, for example. And what if the history of your family is very different than what is being taught in the textbooks? And I think we've been having a lot of conversation about that nationally, about how do we teach the truth, and then what is the truth, right? But if we've left out, a very important part of truth sayers that actually live through the experience, how are we bringing this to our children so that they can understand, what's happened in our country, right? And how, because I think if we don't understand also sometimes what happened, it's kind of like the trauma-informed way, what happened, then we can't go to the next part about, okay, let's really bring out those strengths. So it's kind of like they both have to happen. I don't know if you both agree with that statement that I just made, but it makes sense to me that you almost have to acknowledge one in order to be able to fully live with the strength, because otherwise you have the mistruths that are kind of like a backpack on your back that you can never quite get off because it hasn't been the accurate truth.
Yeah, it's like a secret, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Pushed under the carpet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And secrets don't allow for healing, because without the secret transforming into truth, you don't have that forgiveness. And without that forgiveness, that understanding and that processing, you can't really have that healing. And I think that also creates a space where folks feel invisible. They're not affirmed. They're not seen. They're not witnessed. And there's an incredible danger in being invisible.
I think that's so important what you just stated. And I hope that we're going to take a little break right now. And we come back, we'll talk more about the work, specifically some of the work that you've been doing and why you've chosen certain ways to work with your people, and how you both believe that having a certain focus may be a very important thing, not only for your own tribes and the tribes that you work with, but maybe for everyone in the world. Who knows? We'll talk more about that, but I want your more of the wisdom that comes from your perspective. So we will be back in a couple of minutes, and we will be talking more to Julene Jose and Sunshine Serrano about their wisdom about bringing healing into the world.
All right, perfect. Good segment. All clear.
Thank you, Matt. Hi, ladies. We have about 2 minutes if you need to take a bio break. And I know we have our Facebook Live listeners are listening just as well. But if you need to do a stretch, please do so.
Okay, I'm going to take a bio break. I'll be right back.
All right.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll do the same. Do that.
So I was supposed to move. So I put my stuff everywhere. Yeah, well, soon we'll be alone. Just wanting to hear.
Right. Our Facebook listeners are doing well. We just took a little bit of a break. We'll be back in just a second for more. goodness, what are my glasses?
I probably gave it away to the last person I did it. Thank you. You can just chill for a minute. I'm so sorry.
Sounds like you have people that want you.
Yeah, but I'll.
All right. Got myself my water
Thank you
too.
so much. I'm sorry.
All right.
All right.
Are you back, Julene?
Yes, I'm back. I have a brand new employee who started today, and like, hang tight.
All right, we'll be coming back here.
We'll
in a
be
little
starting
less
back
than
in just
30 seconds.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Okay, we've got 30 seconds.
Okay.
And we'll hear music again.
I'm wondering,
This
Julene,
is
if this
Resiliency
would be a
Within
spot to
with
share
Elaine
about your
Miller
daughter.
Karras. To reach the show during our live
Oh,
broadcast, please call
yeah.
in to 1-866-472-5792. That's 1-866-472-5792. You may also send an email to elaine@resiliencywithin.com. Now, back to this week's show.
Welcome back. This is Elaine Miller Karras with Resiliency Within. And my guests today are Julene Jose and Sunshine Serrano. And right before the break, we were talking about, Julene shared with us kind of the two worlds that her grandma shared with her about the world of their culture and their traditions, and then the new world that they might have to, that they were going to be dealing with when they went to school. And Julene, you had shared a story with me about your daughter. And I'm wondering, would you be willing to share that story? Because I think that's so illustrative of how what you've had to do to navigate these two worlds.
Yes, thank you. So my daughter was in third grade, and she is now in seventh grade. But she had done they were doing some reports on different people in the world. And one of the things they were learning about history was the El Conquistadors. And so the El Conquistadors, there was a particular one. And we did some, research on it, and we were alert. So she did this whole, report on it. And when she went into her room, she talked about how these conquistadors, that's what they did. They conquered. And so our people were some of the people that they, had conquered. And there's a reason why a lot of us have last names of Mexican descent or Spanish descent as first names, because that's whoever we fell under that home of, whoever that person is. So that's why my last name is Jose, which is my married name. So my husband was under somebody, Jose, and my maiden name is Ramon. And so as she shared her story of how, there was the genocide and that they had done all these awful things to our people, and her as a Thanatam youth speaking that truth, her teacher basically said, we don't want to share this. This is something of an opinion. And you need to, she didn't get a good grade because it wasn't fact. And so it was just like, wait a minute, like all this information we found out, was through not only families, but, through, looking it up, doing our own research. And she had one student who is like, that's true. I know my mom was telling me about that. And, that student was not native, but, just speaking those truths. And so, of course, we went through the principal's office. We went through all these different things that I had to defend my child. And we were very proud of her, and bringing that awareness. But it was almost like that teacher didn't want that
To
truth to come.
acknowledge. Yes.
Yes,
So
because then
did the principal, did they apologize for what had
they
happened to your
didn't.
daughter?
Yes, they did an apology. They also raised her grade because I think she had like a D on the assignment or something. And so, she did everything in the rubric of what needed to be done, but it was just that content. So what they ended up doing from there was they sent out like this letter for the next year of kiddos, like, I guess they were trying to cover up or not make it so, I don't know what the word is. I want to say gruesome and detail because she did give some pretty
Gruesome
detail.
details about
Yeah.
about the genocide, right?
About the genocide, yes.
Yes.
And so, me as a parent having to help her and guide her, and because she was feeling bad, like she worked really hard on it and then she didn't get a good grade. And
Do you think that you being an advocate for her and that they had to recant, do you think that was empowering for her ultimately or not?
I really do think it was empowering for her, but not just her, all of my other, kids, and knowing that their moms got their back. And also knowing that, to speak that truth at whatever cost. And I
so,
really,
yes, and so that's so important because that's what we're talking about regarding the truth. I'm sorry I interrupted you. I want you to finish your thought, but yes.
yeah, so at whatever cost, because for a long time, we are being taught all these other romanticized, I guess, ideas of Native culture and, seeing things through Hollywood eyes and, all of that kind of stuff, and not really, like you said, acknowledging the things that had happened. Because if we don't acknowledge those things, then how does healing happen, right? How are my children going to know that truth? And again, it goes back to our last name. Look at our
Yeah.
last name. I mean, that's
Right.
proof right there.
So I think this actually brings me to my next question, which is suffering, as we know, as what you just described, is part of the human experience. But there's a suffering of what actually happened, and then there's a suffering of saying it didn't. And we're in terms of the genocide that happened in Germany, it will never happen again. And then we have something going that just a few years ago here in our country saying this didn't happen, and it's a teacher, and that's just it's a horrible thing that happened to your daughter. And I just want to acknowledge you here, that the courage that you took as her advocate, and also that other people saw that you were standing up for the truth of your people. But if suffering is part of the human experience, how to view suffering in light of the teachings that come from your heritage. So I'm going to come to Sunshine this time. And Sunshine, if you want to go first about, can you touch upon that? So
sure. I want to honor you, Julene, and just say that very similarly in California, our kids are asked to do California Indian missions, which carries a lot of pain. And so it wasn't until walking my son through that journey did I too have that opportunity. So I just want to acknowledge that and just honor you for stepping in for those kiddos. But Elaine, in terms of suffering, you and I have talked about it in different capacities. So I have an Ojibwe spiritual sister. Her name is Cheryl Whitehawk, and she lives in Minnesota. And you and I have shared her teachings. I shared them with you. She taught me the lessons of sweet tears and salty tears. And they're all sacred and part of the healing process, but they come at different times and for totally different reasons. And for me, they really captured the continuum of my emotions or human emotions. And when I think of that, it's from that sense of suffering through joy. So suffering being on one end and to joy. But what I think really resonates as we're talking is that suffering is part of the story of my family, but it is not the chapter. It's like a chapter. It's not really the comprehensive narrative, right? It's not the whole story. But I believe that that's where some of my greatest gifts have come. So through suffering and through pain and through salty tears, we learn to recognize and celebrate joy. And we learn to honor those moments in such a different way. And it really reminds me of the CRIM sort of in the zone resiliency. It's like your high zone grows exponentially when you've known suffering, because your lowest of your lows then stretches you and you have the highest of the highs. So for me, suffering is kind of like a spiritual stretch. It allows me to be more fully who I am and know who I am by having fully witnessed that. So it's about being in my mind, my body, and my spirit. It's like once you've known the saltiest of those tears, you can recognize the sweetness of those that come in a good way.
Thank you for describing it that way. I often am asked about the word resiliency, and sometimes people think resiliency just means that we're kind of stuck in this positive toxicity. But I've always felt that it was really doing a deep lean into the suffering, because only that when we do that deep lean can we also go, oh, but then there's also this. And I just want to, in terms of when we were talking about salty tears and sweet tears, is that when we cry, and in the community resiliency model that I think many of you know that are listening that I helped to develop, we pay attention to tears. And we will say, oh, notice the tears, the warmth, the moisture of the tears. And there's tears that come with sorrow, that are the salty tears we talk about, right? But then there's the tears that come with joy and gratitude. And although they're moist, but the tears feel and we sense them differently. And when you first told me about, oh, we call that sweet tears, I'm going, oh I just love that, because that's what they feel like, sweet tears. So Sunshine knows this, is as I've gone around the world with the community resiliency model, I have shared the sweet tears that originally came from your Indigenous friend from Minnesota, and that teaching. So, I love that. Can you say her name again? I want to make sure I don't forget it ever.
Yes, her name is Cheryl Whitehawk.
Cheryl Whitehawk. Well, I have to somehow meet her someday and thank her for that as well, Sunshine. So then, Julene, over to you about this whole aspect of suffering. Can you share also your view in light of the teachings that come from your heritage about suffering?
I think the biggest thing is in our teachings is honoring our ancestors, honoring their blood that was shed, and really just, that blood wasn't shed in vain. Like, bringing honor to them by living your truth, by walking the talk. And I think that's so important, is that when we're able to see that and think about our lifestyle, like, would my ancestors be approving of what I'm doing right now? Like, they fought for us to be here, and just bringing all of their strength into everything, that we do, and just really bringing honor to them, because without them, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah. Well, and as you're both are talking, I'm just struck very deeply about that you are their living legacy, right? You are going forward in bringing these wonderful words and goodness that you're sharing with us about your strengths and how those strengths come from your heritage. Yes, Sunshine.
The strength which Julene is talking about, I believe, is truly part of our epigenetic story. Like, I believe that is inside of us. It's the wisdom passed for generations from our ancestors, whether it be the sweet or salty tears, but these will come with this lessons, right? And one of the things that I've loved hearing so much recently is African American women talk about a lot lately about Black girl magic, and it was a phrase that I really appreciated. And as Julene's talking, in my worldview, in my way, I would say that we would call that native girl medicine. Native girl medicine, gifted from our ancestors, our grandmothers, our aunties, our mothers, our wisdom keepers. That really is what we live and breathe. That's my waking breath. And so I loved how she captured that.
Native girl wisdom. Did I say that right?
Native girl medicine.
Native girl medicine. Okay. I added the wisdom, I guess. I added the wisdom. Native girl medicine is wisdom. There you go.
So, you know, in terms of like that framing, how you've heard that Black Girl Magic, I sort of think,
Yes.
yeah, it's a native girl medicine. It's a different way, but it kind of resonates in that way to me.
Well, so let me go to I have a couple more questions that I want to ask you. I want to make sure we have time for. I think that both of you are amazing ambassadors for the community resiliency model. You both are community resiliency model teachers. You have both shared amazing stories with me about how bringing skills of well-being that can be integrated very easily into your cultural practices. And I'm wondering if you each could talk a little bit about that. And I'll start with Julene this time.
So, as going through the crim, it was like it just clicked. It was something that made so much sense. It was something that we already do, and already have been passed down, different ways to reset our nervous system, but it was just like put in this really pretty package. And I was like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. And it made sense because a lot of it is congruent in the teachings, as a young woman, is, caring for yourself, caring for your body. And as we were talking, like the first time I ever heard epigenetics, I didn't understand it. But when somebody said blood memory, I'm like, oh, okay, I know what you mean. Because those are some of those teachings that you were being taught, And so like it's just put in this other, like I said, a pretty package. And it's just something that we already do. We already, go and get to our water. We already go and, seek, wisdom from others. We go and seek prayer. We're a praying people. As Native people, we're a praying people. Um, and just when I went through the training, like I said, it just clicked. It just totally made so much sense.
And so something that you can easily bring and teach to others. And so I'm wondering, Sunshine, could you maybe elaborate too in terms of how your perspectives about that?
Yeah, so I love that blood wisdom, blood knowledge. So I'm gonna borrow that. That's powerful. So I guess I have to answer it on two levels. So on a professional level, I think the model is really inclusive and affirming of humanity, of our humanness. That is what makes me love and lean into the model. It's grounded in our body, our humanity, and you can teach the skills to someone and then they become theirs. They don't have to come and see me weekly for a session. They own that. They can evolve that. They can amplify it, change it as they see fit, right? There's something so beautiful about just honoring a person's story and giving that back and allowing them to have that sense of agency. On a personal level, it has allowed me to bring my faith and my spirituality into my work, but also it's just been such a gift to me. And so like many of you, we've experienced a lot of grief over the last few years. I lost my father in July of 2019. And ceremony is such a critical element of my healing journey, of my process through grief. And it was really, really tough for me to not be able to gather, not to be able to be with community and family and really honor my father in ways that I would have liked. And so on a personal level, Crim was such a gift for me over COVID. By being able to take my resources and really amplify them. I remember very distinctly on July 2020, it was the year mark of his death anniversary, and sitting in my own backyard and smelling the sage and smelling sweetgrass and hearing the songs in my mind and feeling the drumbeat in my heart and being able to just hold that and feel that connection. Those are things that Julene's talking about. It was already in us. We already knew that, but being able to have the ability to share that, to put that in a way that bridged the two worlds so that there was a felt sense understanding, to have the language, that is really for me on a very personal level what has has made this a transformational model. And when you can have that experience on a personal level, you can bring it into the professional arena in such a different way. So for me, that really is where CRIM has lifted up and created space for, like Julene said, what we already knew, what we were already doing, and allowed us to share that with folks that may not always have an ancestor, an elder, an auntie to guide them along the way.
So I'm just wondering, I will have a question for you. I'm going to ask this of you, Sunshine. You know, you shared you have a group of women who have been your support through your life. Can you share with us the importance of this?
Yeah, and you know, when Jolene's talking about her daughter, that little girl whose truth was not being affirmed, who was in a space that wasn't safe, that happens to us all throughout the school system. That happened to me, those microaggressions, they're part of what we navigate in the world. And so I was very blessed. About 20 years ago, I went to UCLA and I met a group of women who shared that fierce spirit of service and desire to change the community for the communities that we wanted to go home to, so that our children would know a different way. You realize you can have all the knowledge, education, all the degrees in the world, but it's wisdom that creates change. And your community, your people, they're who hold you accountable. That's where that real wisdom comes from. And so for me, you know, those women are still walking with me today. I called them this morning and said, you know, please, light medicine, pray between 12 and 2, because I want to bring you with me. I'm wearing earrings gifted and a necklace. But what it is about having a circle. And for folks who don't live in like tribal lands, or who live in urban settings, who don't always have those spaces and places to call home, right? It's so critical to have those spiritual lines, those lifelines to community and people, your folks, so that you can continue to be brave, to walk the journey, to feel witnessed and affirmed. And for me, that is just part of an extended circle that continues to honor my ancestors.
Thank you. I'm going to have you and all these women on the show sometime. I would love to hear their collective wisdom. My goodness. So, Julene, you share some very intimate details about your life. And one of the things was that the wellness skills that you've learned through the community resilience model aided in your recovery and maintaining your sobriety. And congratulations, 20 years. So can you say just a little bit about that?
Yeah, so again, really learning about that resiliency space, that okay zone, and expanding that and learning different skills and just reaching out to the ones that already were known, um, and just helping with that reset, in the nervous system has been amazing. Once I learned that, I was like, wow, I can, withstand, a possible, what would you call it? Wanting to withdraw, or wanting to engage again. And it's just gotten stronger, and it used to be I have to live minute by minute, maybe 15 minutes by 15 minutes because of the cravings and things like that. But now, because of this model and all of the models, that I've known, like this really just resonated. And again, helping my nervous system to reset so I
Yes.
can just kind of face whatever's coming at me.
So thank you so much for sharing that too. The community resiliency model, for those of you that may not know about it, it really does work with the biology of the human nervous system, and it is very connected to nature. And just as there are windstorms and suffering that we experience as human beings, as nature does, we know that there's ways that we can cultivate our resiliency as well. I cannot believe we are in our final couple minutes together. So I just want to say for both of you, if people want to get a hold of you and they want to talk with you, how would they get in touch with you? I'm going to ask you first, Sunshine. Can you just say how they would get in touch with you?
Yes, they can email me at Serrano, Serrano @chccc.org. And I'm happy to connect.
All right. And how about for you, Julene?
Yes, you can reach me at jose@pascuayaki.nsn.gov. That is jose@pascuayaqui-nsn.gov.
So thank you so much. Listeners, I think you have heard the wisdom of two very, very wise women who live every day in bringing healing to their communities. You've heard me say before on this show, what else is true? These are two wonderful, amazing living examples of two women that live with not only leaning into their suffering, but also leaning into what else is true about the very richness of their heritage and their tribes and what the wisdom of their heritage continues to give to them. So thank you so much, Julene, Jose, and Sunshine Serrano. And we will have to have you back again because I think we've just started. So thank you for your wisdom.
Thank you. And thank you to all your listeners.
Yes, thank you.
All right, great job today. Good show. All clear.
Thank you very much, Matt.
Yep, thank you.
Now we're still on Facebook Live, and I'll end it in just a second, but I don't know if there's anything more that you two might want to say. Oh my gosh, didn't the time go by so fast?
It did.
It feels like it was 5 minutes.
Yeah. I just wanted to say something from one of the teachings that I've learned too is knowing that you are worth more than your worst mistake and having grace, understanding, and compassion for others and just really seeking words to your unknown words, whether it's digging up things to, your ancestry, to your culture, because it's in you. It's in you, and it's given to you from that blood memory. And to seek those things, to give that acknowledgement, is just the beginning of that bearing witness, so healing can happen.
Thank you for those blessed words. And Sunshine, anything more you want to say?
Yeah, just we are enough, and we must continue to bring our authentic self to the table. And in doing so and being brave, we break those chains of just trauma. And I was taught that if we heal this generation, that we also free and heal 7 generations back. Yes. And protect 7 generations to come. And if we can't do it for our grandbabies, then who can we do it for? So thank you. And thank you for putting the gift of Prim out into the world, because we as humanity, we need to come together and we need to heal and we need to support and lift each other up. Because if not now, I don't know when.
Thank you so much, Sunshine. Such wise words from both of you. And I know that we will see each other again and have more conversations, and I look forward to it. And again, thank you so much for bringing your wisdom to my show, to Voice America. And I know that many, many people from around the world will listen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.